Rules governing consideration. We know when we are talking about the law of contracts, we are talking about guiding principles that ensures contracts are enforceable. So we had earlier dealt with offer, acceptance, offer, elements that make or will make up a good and a valid acceptance. Now we want to look at the rules that governs consideration. Consideration, of course, is the benefits that everybody wants in going into one business or the other. So if we go into business for main aim of profitability, therefore there must be something that we are going to have at the end of the day. So that is basically, in layman's language, what we call consideration. So consideration can be valuable, tangible, in form of money, which is the most pronounced among consideration. It may be promissory, it may equally be intangible, but nevertheless, between the offeror and the offeree, between the promisee and the promisor, they must agree and have acceptance as to the mode or medium or media of communication, of media of consideration, pardon me. So that is consideration. Once that media is settled, whether it's going to be by monetary or any other medium, so it is established. What are the considerations now? And by the way, after consideration, we are going to look at the privity of contracts. Don't forget that everything we've been dealing with is all about the law of contracts or the contracts law. Now we are going, we'll be examining the privity of contract. That is what we are going to be looking at. So join us. Now, what are the rules that govern consideration? Of course, consideration must not be illegal. That is, we should not do anything in which somebody at the end of the day will say, we are going to pay us for something that is illegal, that is unlawful, as simple as that. So consideration, the gain that we accrue to a businessman, to a businesswoman, to somebody in employment should not be that which is illegal. That is one. Also, consideration must be definite. It must not be vague. Consideration must not be vague. I cannot just come to you that do something, help me, please help me do this thing, and at the end of the day I say, what will you give me, sir? What will you give me, ma? And I say, I see you some other time. That is vague. That is vague. Consideration cannot be vague. That there is no consideration in that. That's another rule. The second rule of consideration. Consideration cannot be vague. Consideration cannot be vague. Another thing that we need to know about consideration is that consideration is enforceable by the promisee. That is the person that has delivered the goods or render the service. But this has caveat, we should call it. It has exemption. It has exemption, just like the offer has exception. It has exception, and the exception is that of if we transacted and it involves bank guarantee, in which bank guarantee the payment and the like. So now we are not talking of two parties, now it's like three parties, is become an exception to the rule that consideration must move from the promisee. Consideration. Another thing that we need to know about the rules guiding consideration is that consideration could be executory. That is, could be done and promised to be paid in the future. it could be executory. Consideration should be sufficient, but not necessarily adequate. It's a bit confusing. Sufficiency, how should we now measure sufficiency of a consideration? Once the two of the parties agree, that is maybe to my own layman understanding, once the two parties agree, it is sufficient. It may not be adequate, just like in negotiation. One of the two parties may have higher negotiating power. So in the industrial average, it means at least the industrial average of the pricing or of the consideration. But it may not, maybe as per the standard of the person engaged, it may not be adequate, but it must be sufficient. I hope we understand. I think to the best of my ability, that is how I can really try to trash that one out. So having said that, it must be sufficient but not necessarily adequate. It is equally important for us to know that it could be executory. Consideration could be executory. That is, it could be promised to be paid or to be fulfilled in the future. So they will say in the law term that it is executory. Last but not the least that I'm going to mention is that consideration must not be something that the promisee is bound to do ordinarily, whether by reason of duty, whether by reason of law or the like. So that is not consideration. I'm going to give us an example. Let's take, for example, a policeman that ordinarily should guide us. That is the duty of a policeman, law and order. So if a policeman now said that he or she is going to deploy 2 more policemen on your street as a consideration for what you've done for him or her, that is not consideration. That is not consideration. Don't forget that we earlier discussed that consideration should not be illegal. Consideration should not be illegal. So it is out of duty. It is he or she is bound to have done that, to have delivered that. And because he or she is bound to have delivered that, that can no longer be consideration. That cannot be consideration. It's the duty to perform. So we can't use it as consideration. So these are the rules, or some of the rules that are guiding consideration. GJAMES Associates, we are value to life. We are value to your businesses.